My name is Leo, and I'm a kid who loves stories. Not just any stories, though. I like the ones that are so old they feel like secrets whispered by the wind. The kind of stories you can't just look up in a book, the ones that make you feel like you're standing on the edge of a great, forgotten world. I've always been obsessed with the past, with things that are buried deep in the ground, waiting to be found. My grandpa says I have an old soul, and maybe I do. He's the one who first told me about Ouranopithecus. He's a professor of paleontology, which is a fancy word for someone who studies old stuff, like fossils and ancient bones. He works in a lab that smells like dirt and a little bit like that weird glue my mom uses for her craft projects. It's full of old bones and dust, and sometimes, if you're lucky, you get to see him holding something that's been in the ground for millions of years. He told me that Ouranopithecus was a great ape. An ape that lived a long time ago. Think about the oldest thing you can imagine. A dinosaur, right? Ouranopithecus came way after them, but still so long ago that it's hard to even picture. It lived during something called the late Miocene epoch, which is a big name for a time period about 9 million years ago. That's not a number you can count on your fingers. It's a number that feels like a mountain range of time. Grandpa showed me a picture of the place where they found the first fossils. It was in Greece. Not the Greece with the white buildings and blue roofs that you see in travel books, but a different Greece. A wild, untamed Greece from a time when the world was changing. He said the name Ouranopithecus means ape from Ouranos. In Greek mythology, Ouranos was the god of the sky. So, it was the sky ape. It's a cool name, but it doesn't really tell you much about what it was like. Grandpa explained that the ape's fossils were found in a place called Macedonia, which is a region in northern Greece. It was a dusty place with canyons and ravines, and that's where the scientists, a couple of French guys, found the first bits and pieces of it. The first piece they found was just a jawbone, but it was enough to make them realize they had something special. He told me to imagine what the world was like back then. It was hotter than it is now, and the climate was changing. The huge, thick forests that had covered Europe for ages were starting to shrink. The land was getting drier, and grasslands were starting to spread out like a big, green carpet. It wasn't a sudden change, like someone flipping a switch. It was slow, like a long goodbye to the old world and a slow hello to a new one. This was a time of big shifts for animals, too. The creatures that lived in the dense forests had to either adapt or die out. This is a big deal because it meant that Ouranopithecus had to figure out how to live in this new world, this world of open spaces and fewer trees. Ouranopithecus wasn't a human, of course, but it was a hominid. That's another one of Grandpa's big words. It means it was part of the same family tree as us, the great apes. Think of it like this: if you and your cousin are in the same family, you're related, but you're not the same person. Ouranopithecus was like our very distant, long-lost cousin. It had some features that were a little like ours, but also a lot of features that were very different. It's a link in the chain, Grandpa says, a chapter in a book we're still trying to read. The more he talked, the more I imagined it. I pictured a place that was both beautiful and a little scary. A land of wide open plains with patches of trees, where you might see a herd of strange-looking animals grazing in the distance. The air would be warm and dry, and the sun would beat down on the landscape. And somewhere in that landscape, there would be Ouranopithecus. What did it look like? Grandpa said the fossils they found were mostly from the jaw and the teeth, with a few other bits and pieces. From those, they could tell that Ouranopithecus was big. Really big. A male might have been the size of a modern-day gorilla. Can you imagine a gorilla-sized ape roaming around Greece? I thought that was the coolest thing ever. The teeth were a big clue. Grandpa said the teeth of Ouranopithecus were thick and had a very specific kind of wear pattern. This told the scientists what it ate. It didn't eat soft, juicy fruit like some modern apes. Its teeth were designed for chewing on hard, tough things. Things like nuts, hard-shelled fruits, or even roots and tubers that it would have had to dig up from the ground. This makes sense for a creature living in a world where the forests were disappearing. If your favorite fruit tree is gone, you have to find something else to eat. So, Ouranopithecus had to get tough. It had to be a survivor. And the skull, the parts of the skull they found, showed it had a big, wide face and a thick brow ridge, like a shelf over its eyes. It wasn't a delicate creature. It was strong and built for a hard life. The thought of this powerful, forgotten ape, walking around a landscape that would one day become ancient Greece, just blew my mind. It was a whole other world, a secret world that had been hidden for millions of years. And Grandpa was one of the few people who got to peek inside. He told me about the controversy, too. How some scientists think Ouranopithecus is directly related to us, a direct ancestor. Others think it's a closer relative to orangutans, or maybe it was just a branch of the family tree that ended, a dead-end street. The evidence is still pretty thin, he said. Just a few pieces of a puzzle with millions of missing parts. But that's what makes it so exciting. It's a mystery, and every new fossil they find is like finding a new clue. I think that's why I love it so much. It's not a done story. It's a story that's still being told, one bone at a time. It's a story about a forgotten great ape, an ape from a time when the world was changing, an ape that had to get tough to survive. And it's a story that's waiting for someone to find the next piece. Grandpa's lab is my favorite place in the world. It's a messy, wonderful jungle of shelves and tables piled high with plaster casts, tools, and notebooks. There's a big, dusty map of the world on one wall with red pins stuck in different places. Each pin is a place where something important was found. One of those pins is in Greece, right in the spot where Ouranopithecus was discovered. He told me that finding the first Ouranopithecus jawbone was like a starting pistol for a race. After that first find in the 1970s, other scientists knew where to look. They started digging in the same area, hoping to find more. And they did. Over the years, they found more pieces of the puzzle. More teeth, fragments of a skull, and even some postcranial bones. That's what Grandpa calls the bones that aren't in the head. These new discoveries started to paint a clearer, more detailed picture of Ouranopithecus. It was like they were slowly, carefully putting together a giant jigsaw puzzle. The more pieces they found, the more they learned. One of the most surprising things they figured out was how different the males and females were. Grandpa called it sexual dimorphism, and it's one of those big scientific words that's actually pretty simple. It just means the boys and girls looked really different. In most animals, there's some difference, but in Ouranopithecus, it was huge. The males were much, much bigger than the females. They had these massive canine teeth, like sharp daggers sticking out of their mouths. Grandpa said this is a sign of a lot of competition. When males are so much bigger, it usually means they're fighting each other a lot for mates, and those big teeth were probably for showing off and fighting. It makes me think of those nature documentaries with the big male gorillas beating their chests. Ouranopithecus males might have done something similar, using their size and teeth to prove who was the strongest. The environment in Greece at the time was a big factor in all this. The world was still warm, but things were drying out. The dense forests of the past were being replaced by savannas and woodlands. Imagine a place with lots of tall grasses and scattered trees, more like parts of Africa today than what we think of as Greece. This change in scenery meant a change in lifestyle for the animals living there. Ouranopithecus couldn't just swing from tree to tree all day. It had to spend a lot more time on the ground, walking. We don't have a lot of their leg or foot bones, so we can't say for sure how they walked, but Grandpa thinks they were probably quadrupedal, which means they walked on all fours, like other apes. But spending more time on the ground meant they were exposed to more danger from predators and had to be tough to survive. The story gets even more complicated because Ouranopithecus wasn't the only great ape in that part of the world. There were other similar creatures around at the same time. This is where the story gets really interesting, like a big family drama with a bunch of characters we barely know. There was one that lived in Turkey, for example, called Ouranopithecus turci, and another one called Grycopithecus that some people think might be the same thing as Ouranopithecus. It's like they're all part of a big, confusing family tree, and nobody has the full picture yet. Scientists argue about it all the time, which Grandpa says is a good thing. It means they're all trying to figure out the truth. One of the most exciting, and also most debated, ideas about Ouranopithecus is its connection to us. Some scientists believe that Ouranopithecus is a close relative of the last common ancestor of humans and the other great apes. This would mean that somewhere in this dusty Greek landscape, a part of our own story was being written. But it's a really controversial idea. Most scientists think that the split between our ancestors and the ancestors of chimpanzees happened in Africa, not Europe. So, Ouranopithecus might have just been a really interesting side branch, a European ape that went extinct without leading to anything else. It's a big debate, and it shows how hard it is to put together a family tree with only a few broken branches. Grandpa showed me a picture of a reconstructed Ouranopithecus skull. It was pieced together from different fragments found over the years. It had that prominent brow ridge and a broad face. It looked powerful, but also a little sad, like a ghost from a lost time. When you look at the skull, you can see how it was different from a chimpanzee or a gorilla, but also how it had some similarities. The shape of the face, the size of the teeth, they all give clues. The scientists use computers to scan the fossils and compare them to the bones of other apes and humans. It's like a high-tech detective story, trying to find the similarities and differences that tell you who is related to who. This is the part of the story that I find the most amazing. That from a few broken pieces of bone, they can figure out so much. They can tell what a creature ate, how big it was, and even guess about its social life and how it moved. It's like magic, but it's actually a lot of really hard work and patience. It's about looking at every tiny detail, every scratch on a tooth, every little bump on a bone, and asking, what does this mean? Ouranopithecus lived a hard life. The climate was getting drier, food was getting tougher, and there was probably a lot of competition. It's a story of survival. But in the end, Ouranopithecus went extinct. The world changed too much, or maybe another creature came along that was better at surviving. The exact reason is another part of the mystery. It's a reminder that evolution isn't a straight line. It's a big, sprawling tree with many branches, and a lot of those branches don't make it to the top. Ouranopithecus was one of those branches, a forgotten part of the story, but an important one all the same. And the fact that we're still talking about it, still trying to understand it, proves that even though it's been gone for millions of years, its story isn't over yet. The next time I visited Grandpa's lab, he had a new idea to explain Ouranopithecus. He said that to really understand it, you have to get inside its head. Not literally, of course, but you have to think about the world from its point of view. Imagine you're an Ouranopithecus. You wake up on a chilly morning, the air is full of a crisp, earthy smell. You're not in a deep, dark jungle. You're in a place with a lot of open space. The sun is just starting to warm the land, and you can see a long way. This is both good and bad. It's good because you can see other Ouranopithecus from far away, but it's also bad because predators can see you, too. The world for Ouranopithecus was full of things that could eat you. There were big cats, bigger and scarier than anything we have today, and other fierce creatures roaming the land. That's why being big was so important. The male Ouranopithecus, with its huge body and dagger-like teeth, was probably the protector of its group. The females and their young would have looked to the males to keep them safe. It's a rough and tumble world, and you have to be tough to make it. Grandpa said that the climate change I mentioned before, the drying out and the spread of grasslands, wasn't just a simple change. It was a crisis. For animals that lived in the trees, it was like someone was slowly taking their home away. The forests were like a supermarket for them, full of nice, soft fruits. But with the forests shrinking, they had to go out into the open to find food. And the food they found there was different. It was harder, more fibrous, and sometimes it was hidden underground. That's why the teeth of Ouranopithecus are so important. They are a record of this great change. The thick enamel and the strong jaws show that they were eating things that were tough to chew. It's a story written on their teeth. I pictured an Ouranopithecus family foraging for food. A big male, maybe sitting on the ground, cracking open a hard nut with his powerful jaws. The females and their kids would be nearby, maybe looking for roots or other plants. They wouldn't be like modern humans, with big brains and tools. They were just apes, but they were smart apes, clever enough to survive in a world that was getting tougher by the day. They had to learn how to find new food sources, how to protect themselves, and how to raise their young in a more dangerous world. The name Ouranopithecus, the sky ape, is a bit of a funny name when you think about it. It's not like they were flying or anything. But maybe it has a different meaning. Maybe it's a way of saying that they were once at the top of their world, the masters of the sky and the trees, and then the world changed, and they had to come down to earth. Or maybe it's just because the first fossils were found in a place that looked up at the sky. Either way, it's a name that gives me a good picture in my head. The scientific community is still trying to figure out exactly where Ouranopithecus fits on our family tree. Grandpa says it's like a big detective story. You have to look at all the clues. The shape of the jaw, the size of the teeth, the way the bones are put together. There are two big ideas, two main theories. The first is that Ouranopithecus is a really old relative of the great apes that live in Asia, like orangutans. The second, and more controversial, idea is that Ouranopithecus is actually a close relative of the ancestors of humans. The evidence for this is a little bit thin, but it's really exciting. There are some similarities in the shape of the face and the teeth that make some scientists think it might be true. It's like a choose-your-own-adventure story, but with fossils instead of pages. You have to look at the evidence and decide which path to take. Maybe Ouranopithecus went extinct, a fascinating dead end. Or maybe, just maybe, it was part of the beginning of our own story, a link that connects us all the way back to this dusty Greek landscape millions of years ago. Grandpa says it's important to keep an open mind. New discoveries can change everything. A single new tooth or a tiny piece of a skull can completely rewrite the story. The story of Ouranopithecus is a reminder of how interconnected everything is. The climate changes, the forests shrink, and an animal that was once a master of its environment has to adapt or disappear. And in that struggle, a new story begins, a story of survival and change. It's a story that's millions of years old, and yet, it feels so immediate and important. It's about the very beginning of the world as we know it, a time when our ancestors were still just an idea, a possibility in the distant future. And Ouranopithecus was a part of that, a forgotten link in the great chain of life, a ghost of a story waiting to be told. One afternoon, Grandpa let me help him clean some small fossils. They weren't Ouranopithecus, just some tiny rodent bones, but it still felt like I was a real paleontologist. I used a tiny brush and a little metal pick, carefully scraping away the dirt. As I worked, I thought about the Ouranopithecus story again, about the missing pieces and the big questions. I asked Grandpa how they even knew these bones were from an ape in the first place. He said it's all in the details, in the tiny features that you and I might not even notice. He explained that the shape of the teeth is a major giveaway. Ouranopithecus had big, thick enameled molars, which are the chewing teeth at the back of the mouth. The cusps on these molars, the little bumps on the chewing surface, were low and rounded. This is different from the teeth of many other primates and tells a lot about their diet. He explained that a gorilla's teeth are built for grinding up tough plants and leaves. A chimpanzee's teeth are better for a mix of things, including fruit. But Ouranopithecus's teeth were like a nutcracker, perfect for chewing up hard, tough foods. This makes sense for a world with fewer forests. You can't just rely on soft fruit anymore. You have to be able to eat whatever you can find. Another clue was the jawbone itself. The jawbone of Ouranopithecus was big and strong, a powerful machine for chewing. Grandpa said the jaw muscles would have been huge, giving it a powerful bite. You can see where the muscles attach to the bone, and it tells a story of strength. The face, too, was broad and wide. All of these features together paint a picture of a tough, strong ape built for survival in a changing world. And then there's the question of bipedalism. This is a big one. Bipedalism is the ability to walk on two legs, and it's one of the things that makes humans, and our direct ancestors, so unique. We don't have enough bones of Ouranopithecus to know for sure how it walked. We have a few arm and hand bones, and they suggest it was probably a quadruped, walking on all fours, maybe with its knuckles like a gorilla. But some scientists have pointed to some features in the face and the teeth that hint at a more upright posture. It's one of the biggest mysteries of Ouranopithecus. Was it an ape that lived in a time before bipedalism, or was it an ape that was starting to take the first, tentative steps toward walking on two legs? Grandpa says that this is a question that new fossils will have to answer. If they find a foot bone or a pelvis bone, the story could change completely. Imagine finding a foot bone with a shape that hints at bipedalism. It would be like finding a secret key that unlocks a whole new room in the story. It would make the idea that Ouranopithecus is a direct ancestor of humans a lot more believable. But for now, it's just a mystery, a question mark at the end of a very long sentence. The story of Ouranopithecus is also a story about the continents themselves. During the time Ouranopithecus was alive, Europe and Asia were still connected, and Africa was slowly drifting north, getting closer. This meant that animals could move between the continents, and this migration played a huge role in evolution. It's possible that Ouranopithecus was part of a big wave of apes that moved out of Africa and into Eurasia, or maybe it was a part of a group that evolved in Eurasia and then went extinct. The Earth itself was changing, and the animals were changing with it. I think about the name again, sky ape. It makes me think about the wide, open sky over the Greek landscape millions of years ago. The sky that Ouranopithecus would have seen every day, a sky that was the same color and shape as the sky we see today, but a world so different beneath it. A world with big, powerful apes, walking on all fours, trying to survive in a world that was getting drier and harder. The more I learn about Ouranopithecus, the more I realize that the story of human evolution isn't a simple, straight line. It's a complicated web, with a bunch of different branches and offshoots. Some of them led to us, and some of them just ended. Ouranopithecus is a part of that web, a single thread that tells a story of a time when our family tree was even more diverse and interesting than we thought. It's a forgotten link, but an important one all the same. It reminds us that our story is not just about humans, but about all the creatures that came before us, and all the creatures that were part of the big, messy, and wonderful story of life on Earth. And every time I pick up a fossil and brush away the dirt, I feel like I'm a part of that story, too. I asked Grandpa once if the name Ouranopithecus came from the same word as the planet Uranus. He laughed and said it did, and that it was a cool coincidence. He said that a lot of these scientific names come from Old Greek and Latin words. It's like a secret language that scientists use to talk to each other, a language that connects a dusty old bone to a whole world of ideas. We decided that Ouranopithecus was a good name for a creature that felt so far away, almost like it was from another planet. He pulled out a book with a drawing of what a full Ouranopithecus might have looked like. It was based on all the small pieces they had found. It was a powerfully built ape, with long arms and a broad chest. The face was the most striking thing, that thick brow ridge and the strong jaw. The artist had drawn it with dark fur and a thoughtful, serious expression. It looked like a creature that had seen a lot and lived a hard life. He explained that one of the things that makes Ouranopithecus so interesting is how similar it is to some of the earliest hominins we know about. Hominins are the group that includes humans and our direct ancestors. One of the very first hominins we've found is called Australopithecus, like the famous Lucy fossil. Australopithecus lived in Africa millions of years after Ouranopithecus, but some scientists have noticed similarities in the teeth and face. This is one of the main reasons some people think Ouranopithecus might be a link between the great apes of Eurasia and the earliest hominins in Africa. This is a really big idea, a huge puzzle with some missing pieces. The problem is the geography. Ouranopithecus was in Europe, and the first hominins we know about are in Africa. So, if Ouranopithecus was an ancestor, its descendants would have had to travel from Europe back to Africa. This is called the out of Eurasia hypothesis, and it's a big debate in the world of paleontology. Most scientists believe that all of our ancestors evolved in Africa and stayed there for a long time before moving out. But the similarities between Ouranopithecus and Australopithecus make some people wonder. Grandpa says that the story is not as simple as out of Africa. He says that animals have been moving all over the planet for millions of years. The continents were in different places, and the climate was always changing. It's possible that a group of apes left Africa, evolved in Eurasia, and then a different group of them moved back to Africa, where they eventually became the ancestors of humans. It's a twist in the story, a surprise ending that might turn out to be true. Another thing that's really cool about Ouranopithecus is what it tells us about the rest of the world. At the time Ouranopithecus was living in Greece, there were other big changes happening. The Mediterranean Sea, which we think of as this big, beautiful ocean, was actually starting to dry up. This was a slow process that took a long time, but it had a huge effect on the climate of Europe. The drying of the sea and the change in climate was part of the reason the forests started to shrink and the grasslands started to spread. So, Ouranopithecus was living in a world that was literally changing beneath its feet. It's like a movie, with all these different things happening at the same time, the continents moving, the seas drying up, and the animals having to adapt to a brand new world. He said that the name Ouranopithecus might be more meaningful than we thought. Ouranos is also the god of the heavens, and sometimes it's used to refer to something that's very old and primordial. In that sense, Ouranopithecus is a primordial ape, a creature from the dawn of our story, a distant relative that lived in a world that's completely gone now. It's a name that gives it a sense of power and majesty, even though it's been extinct for millions of years. The most important lesson Grandpa taught me about Ouranopithecus is that we shouldn't get too attached to any one theory. He said that science is a process of discovery, and the story is always changing. What we think is true today might be proven wrong tomorrow with a new fossil find. It's a constant puzzle, a game of hide and seek with the past. And Ouranopithecus is one of the most mysterious and interesting pieces of that puzzle. It's a creature that challenges us to think bigger, to consider different possibilities, and to remember that our own story is a lot more complicated and amazing than we ever thought. It's a story with a forgotten chapter, a chapter with a name that means sky ape, a creature that lived a long, long time ago in a world that's no longer here. I decided to do a project for school on Ouranopithecus. Grandpa helped me, of course, but I did all the drawing and writing. I wanted to tell the story in a way that made sense to my friends. I drew pictures of the landscape, the wide open grasslands with a few trees scattered around. I drew a big, powerful male Ouranopithecus with his thick brow and dagger-like teeth, and a smaller female and her baby. I tried to make it look as real as possible, based on all the things Grandpa had told me. The project was about how this one creature, Ouranopithecus, told a bigger story about the whole world. I explained that the shrinking forests and the spreading grasslands weren't just a random event. They were part of a huge, global change. The world was cooling down and getting drier, and this was changing everything. It was like a giant domino effect. The climate changed, which changed the plants, which changed the animals that ate the plants, which changed the animals that ate those animals. Ouranopithecus was right in the middle of all of it. I explained that Ouranopithecus wasn't just a simple animal. It was a survivor. Its thick teeth were a perfect example of this. It had to be tough to live in that world. It couldn't just eat soft fruit all day. It had to eat hard things, things that would break the teeth of other apes. Its powerful jaw and thick enamel were its superpowers, the things that helped it survive in a world that was becoming more and more difficult. The part about the male and female differences was a little harder to explain. I didn't want to make it sound like the boys were just beating up the girls. I explained it like this: the males had to be big and strong to protect the group. They had to fight off predators and other rival males. The females had to be smaller and more nimble, maybe so they could climb the remaining trees to get a different kind of food, or to escape from danger. It was a division of labor, a team effort to survive. The big, strong male would protect the group, and the clever, smaller females would help find food and raise the young. It's a story of a family, a very different kind of family than ours, but a family nonetheless. I also talked about the mystery. I explained that scientists don't know for sure if Ouranopithecus is one of our ancestors. It's a big question mark, a puzzle with a lot of missing pieces. I drew a family tree with a big, empty space, and then a little branch coming off it labeled Ouranopithecus. And I drew another branch that was labeled humans. and I put a question mark and a dotted line between them. I wanted my friends to understand that science isn't just about facts. It's also about questions, about trying to figure things out, about being curious about the world. The name Ouranopithecus was a big hit with my friends. They thought it sounded like a superhero name, and that it was cool that it meant sky ape. They asked me what it looked like and if it was a good guy or a bad guy. I told them it wasn't either. It was just a creature, a real animal that lived a long, long time ago. Its story wasn't about good or evil. It was about survival. My project got a good grade, and my teacher said she learned something new. That was the best part. I felt like I had shared a secret with the world. I had taken this dusty, forgotten chapter of our story and brought it to life for my friends and my teacher. I had made them think about a world that was gone, a world that was filled with powerful, forgotten apes, and a world that was slowly becoming the world we know today. I realized then that I wasn't just a kid who loved stories. I was a storyteller myself, and I was using the clues from the past to tell a story about the future, a story about where we all came from. The more I thought about Ouranopithecus, the more I saw it everywhere. When I saw a documentary about chimpanzees, I wondered if Ouranopithecus had similar behaviors. Did they use tools? Did they have a social structure? Grandpa said it's impossible to know for sure with the fossils we have, but it's fun to think about. He said that all we can do is make educated guesses based on what we see in modern apes and what the bones tell us. He told me about a different fossil find that was also in Greece. A new fossil, a jawbone, was found that was a little bit younger than Ouranopithecus. It was given a new name, Grycopithecus. The jawbone was different enough to be its own species, but it also had some similarities. And some of those similarities were very human-like. This find caused a huge stir in the scientific community. It made some people wonder if the out of Eurasia hypothesis was actually true. Maybe the split between our ancestors and other apes happened in Europe, not Africa. This is where the story gets really complicated, like a twist in a detective novel. One minute, you think you know where the story is going, and the next, a new clue appears and you have to start all over again. The Grycopithecus jawbone was that new clue. It was a piece of evidence that made everyone reevaluate everything they thought they knew. It's a testament to how hard it is to put together the full story. We're still in the early chapters, with a lot of the book missing. I asked Grandpa what he thought. He said that he was excited by the new find, but also cautious. He said that one fossil isn't enough to rewrite the entire story of human evolution. We need more evidence. We need to find more bones, more teeth, more pieces of the puzzle. But he said it was a good thing that people were talking about it and debating it. It meant that a new generation of scientists was getting excited about the past, and that's a good thing for the future. The story of Ouranopithecus is a story about the great apes. It's a story about a whole group of creatures that lived and died long ago, creatures that were powerful and clever and beautiful in their own way. We only know a little bit about them, but that little bit tells us so much. It tells us about the world they lived in, the challenges they faced, and the adaptations they made. It's a story of a lost world, a world of shrinking forests and spreading grasslands, a world that was a stage for the drama of life. I sometimes wonder what Ouranopithecus would have thought of us. Would they have recognized us as a distant relative? Would they have seen a little bit of themselves in our hands, in our faces? Or would we have seemed like creatures from another world? It's a fun thing to think about. Ouranopithecus was a product of its time, an ape that was perfectly adapted to its world. We are products of our time, a species that has adapted to its world in a completely different way. But we're all connected, all part of the same big, beautiful, and messy family tree. The story of Ouranopithecus is a story about the power of a single bone. A single fossil, found in the ground in a dusty landscape in Greece, can open up a whole new world of questions and possibilities. It can challenge everything we thought we knew and force us to look at our own story from a new perspective. It's a story about the forgotten, the ones who didn't make it to the end of the story, but who were still an important part of the journey. And I think that's a story worth telling. It's a story that reminds us to be curious, to keep looking, and to never stop asking questions about the world and where we all came from. I was at Grandpa's lab one last time before my school year ended. He had a new book on his desk, a big, thick one with lots of pictures of fossils. He said it was a new study on Ouranopithecus, and he let me look at it. The pictures showed all the different fossil fragments they had found over the years, and they were all so tiny. A piece of a jaw here, a single tooth there, a tiny bone from the hand. It was incredible to think that all of the stories he had told me came from these small, broken pieces. The new book talked about the Grycopithecus jawbone again, and it said that a lot of scientists now think it might be a different species, a separate branch of the family tree. It seems the story is still changing, and the controversy is still there. But the book also talked about the environment in more detail. It said that the grasslands that were spreading across Europe were not like the flat, boring grasslands we might imagine. They were more like open woodlands, with patches of trees and bushes scattered around. This meant that Ouranopithecus was probably spending time both in the trees and on the ground, a true creature of two worlds. This made a lot of sense to me. It explained why it would need to be a powerful ape, but also why it would have features that were a little different from a fully ground-dwelling ape. It was living in a transitional world, a world that was half forest and half plain. And it had to be clever and tough enough to survive in both. The book also had a new drawing of what an Ouranopithecus family might have looked like. This time, the male looked less like a gorilla and more like a big, powerful chimpanzee. The females were smaller and more delicate, and the babies were clinging to them. The artist had drawn them in a landscape that was both beautiful and a little bit harsh, with a dry riverbed in the background and a few vultures circling in the sky. It was a more realistic picture, and it made me feel like I was really there, watching them. Grandpa said that the story of Ouranopithecus is a story about the what-ifs of history. What if the climate hadn't changed? What if the forests hadn't shrunk? Would Ouranopithecus have survived? Would it have continued to evolve in Europe? We'll never know for sure, and that's the beauty of it. It's a story that challenges us to think about all the different paths that evolution could have taken, all the different possibilities that were out there. The story of Ouranopithecus is a story of a forgotten chapter, a missing link in our great, big family tree. It's a reminder that our story is not as simple as we might think. It's a story of a world that was completely different from our own, a world with a different cast of characters, and a different set of rules. But it's a world that is still a part of us, a part of our past. And every time a new fossil is found, every time a new study is published, we learn a little bit more about that world, and a little bit more about ourselves. I looked at the picture in the book one more time, at the thoughtful eyes of the Ouranopithecus, at the powerful jaw, at the apathetic grace of a creature that lived so long ago. I felt a sense of connection, a sense of wonder. I was a kid in a lab, holding a piece of a story that was millions of years old. And I knew that no matter what else I did in my life, I would always remember Ouranopithecus, the forgotten link, the sky ape, the creature that reminded me that the biggest and most amazing stories are often the ones that are buried deep in the ground, just waiting for someone to find them.